War. It's a devastating human experience. But war also shapes the world, affecting individuals, families, and nations in ways that can be both negative and positive. As generations grow more distant from war, they may begin to forget the lessons learned through that conflict. That's why some countries, like Canada, are placing more importance on military history and remembering the implications of war through museums and educational facilities.
Canadians and their government felt that the country deserved to have a national military history museum worthy of a great country in the world today. And the Board of Trustees of this museum, working with the government, commissioned this project, hired the architecture, and created the new War Museum in the heart of the nation's capital.
Serving as Canada's National Museum of Military History, the Canadian War Museum is dedicated to preserving artifacts of war and educating the public about Canada's military involvement, from earliest times to present day.
The museum covers all wars in which Canadians have participated or which have been fought on Canadian soil. So unlike the vast majority of war museums the world over, we cover everything from the first known instance of death by organized violence in Canada several thousand years ago, right through to the most recent conflicts, and we do it both on the home front and abroad. So there is a personal home front community story to every conflict we cover, as well as the uniformed armed services fighting wherever they happen to be engaged.
Museums dedicated to the topic of war, like the one in Canada, are more than just a collection of artifacts. They have a complex message to convey.
Canadian history, if you analyze it, about 80% of it is military, either as a result of war or because of war. It has changed us economically, socially, politically. And so to understand Canadian history, you must understand Canadian military history.
I think this museum does an awful lot to put it in context, and I think this is probably a spot that people should visit if they're going to study our military history at all.
We think that visitors to a war museum need to understand the impact that military history has had on their lives and on their society. And we hope that visitors to the museum will leave understanding that war is a devastating human experience, war has impacted their lives today, and that they must remember.
Established in 1880, the Canadian War Museum relocated in 2005 to a beautifully designed new facility situated in downtown Ottawa, where it now houses its impressive collection of nearly 500,000 military artifacts.
The Canadian War Museum has a number of very important, unique collections. It has one of the largest collections of military vehicles in the world, and it has one of the most important and comprehensive and rich war art collections. There are some 15,000 pieces by some very well-known and important Canadian artists and other artists from other nations as well.
One of the aspects of the museum of which we're all very, very proud is that we took a military museum and we made it not just a history of the armed forces, we made it a museum that was for everyone. So we emphasized personal stories, human experience, and not just military technology, tactics, and the way things moved on the battlefield. So I think our visitors are often quite surprised when they arrive that there are things for everyone from 10 to 110.
The 440,000 square foot building incorporates state-of-the-art research and learning facilities, visually striking architecture, and energy-efficient construction. But that's not all.
The architectural vision for the Canadian War Museum is based on the theme of regeneration. And architect Raymond Moriyama based that whole vision on the battlefields of Europe in which Canadians fought and died in both world wars in particular. And those battlefields today are no longer scarred places of conflict, but in fact have been reclaimed by nature, and therefore they've been regenerated. So Mr. Moriyama brought that vision to the Canadian War Museum. The building itself literally emerges from the banks of the Ottawa River, and half of its roof is grass, really evoking the images of those battlefields that have now been reclaimed by nature. So the message is a hopeful message that societies and civilizations can overcome conflict and can learn from conflict, and indeed that really is the principal message and mandate of all history museums, is to be centers of learning and education and knowledge creation and dissemination.
As a whole, the galleries, the research center, and even the building itself are intended to inspire visitors to remember and interpret Canadian military history, and to use this knowledge of the past to better understand the present and to shape the future.
We're working very hard to broaden and deepen our already excellent collections so that they can be as reflective as possible of Canada's military history. And we're also working to make sure that those collections are accessible to as many visitors as possible. We're doing that by developing new traveling exhibitions. We're also developing virtual exhibitions for our website so that visitors can actually access our collections no matter where they live. We're hoping by doing these things that we will be able to help visitors understand that military history is really about ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
The Canadian War Museum, the spirit of a country, the courage of its people. Visit the Canadian War Museum today or go to warmuseum.ca for more information.